Now that's a tune you're going to be humming all week. And with that introduction, we say good morning and welcome to another Sunday here at First Unitarian Society, where independent thinkers such as ourselves gather in a safe, nurturing place such as this to explore issues of social, spiritual, and ethical significance as we try to make a difference in this world. I'm Steve Goldberg, a proud, exceptionally adorable member of this congregation. And as the cow said after crossing the high meadow, I'm utterly tickled to see all of you here today. I'm especially tickled to see any guests, visitors, or newcomers. If this is your first time at First Unitarian Society, I think you'll find that this is a special place, and we welcome you to join us at our fellowship hour right after the service. And speaking of the service, this would be a perfect time to silence those pesky electronic devices that you just won't need for the next hour, because instead you'll be enjoying today's service, which I know will touch your heart, stir your spirit, and trigger one or two new thoughts. We're really glad you're here, and right now we'd like to invite you to join in a moment of centering silence so we can be fully present with each other this morning.
Moving from our centering to our opening words written by Morrison-Reed. The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens, and our strength is renewed. I invite us to rise in the ways that we do and join in our opening hymn, which is Around. And what we will do is we will sing through as a gathered body, one time through together, and then we will divide in half. And this side of the sanctuary will be part one. This side will be part two. Heather will lead part one, I will lead part two, and we will sing it through as a round 2 times. May we join our voices together in song. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near.
Gathered here in the mystery of the hour,
gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power.
I invite you to remain up in all the ways that we do as Steve comes forward to light our chalice. And together we say the words printed in the order of service. In a world that feeds on moral outrage, we are here to cultivate moral courage. In a time that prizes picking sides, we gather to draw a wider circle. And in a culture that teaches us to get for what we give and to ask, what's in it for me, we come to practice generosity and to remember we are all in this together. I invite you to turn to your neighbors and exchange friendly greetings.
I was thinking about you on the way over here.
I invite the young and young at heart to come forward for a message for all ages. We have a storybook this morning. Good morning. How are you? It's a sunny Sunday. Hello. Your birthday is coming up. Oh, I see. Yes. Today is the birthday party. Very good. You know what? This month, we are talking about belonging. Do you know what that word means? Like, who do we belong to, or where do we belong? We belong to our parents, someone says. Do you think our parents belong to us? Uh-huh. Yeah, what about pets? Do you have any pets?
Oh, I have a cat.
You have cat? Yeah. Well, this book is about a cat.
Oh, yay.
And this cat is called Scrawny Cat. There's Scrawny Cat sitting with a bird. A scrawny cat crept down the street. He was lonely. He was little. He was lost. He had belonged to someone once, and she had belonged to him. Someone who picked him up and scratched his ears and let him lick her chin. Someone who knew his name. Now everyone called him, "Get out of here!" But the scrawny cat knew his name was not, "Get out of here." The wind hurried the scrawny cat along. He hunkered in a doorway where good smells drifted out. Maybe someone would let him inside and give him something warm to eat. But when the door opened, a man yelled, "Get out of here!" So the scrawny cat bolted down the street, straight into a big dog. "Grrr," said the big dog. The skittery, scrawny cat raced away, all the way to the dock. "Grrr," growled the big dog right behind. What else could the scared little scrawny cat do? He leapt into a dinghy just as, kaboom! The rain plummeted down. The big dog ran away. The scrawny cat huddled under the dinghy seat. Up and down, the dinghy rocked on the waves just the way someone used to rock the scrawny cat in a chair. The tuckered out scrawny cat put his head on his paws and fell asleep. The wind blew. The waves crashed. The rope tying the dinghy to the dock snapped. When the scrawny cat woke up, all he saw was water everywhere. Poor, shivery, scrawny cat. He lapped the rainwater in the bottom of the dinghy and wished his stomach didn't chew so on his ribs. At last, the sun came up, golden across the waves. Up ahead, just where the boat was headed, the scrawny cat saw a rock and a tree and a house on the sand. A woman came out of the house. She had been a sailor once, but her ship had crashed on the rocks. She had built a little house for herself and settled down to catch fish and gather seaweed and pick berries. But sometimes she missed sailing the open sea, and all by herself she got a little lonely. Now she came down to the shore to see what the storm had blown in. The scrawny cat hunched under the dinghy seat. Would the woman throw things at him and call him, "Get out of here"? The dinghy grated on the sand. The woman reached down and picked the scrawny cat up. "How did you get all the way out here all by yourself?" the woman said. "You must be quite a sailor cat." The woman took the scrawny cat into her house. She rubbed him dry with a towel and put a bowl of fish stew on the floor. The scrawny cat lapped up the stew until his stomach was round and full. The woman picked him up again. Would she throw him out the door? No, not at all. She sat in a rocking chair and scratched the scrawny cat's ears. I've been waiting for some company," the woman said, "and here you come, sailing in like a regular skipper." The scrawny cat purred. "Skipper, that's what I will call you," the woman said. "I am Emma." Skipper purred even harder and licked Emma under her chin. If you are lucky enough to go sailing someday far out to sea, you might see them together, Skipper and Emma. Skipper isn't scrawny anymore. He's a real sailor cat now. But best of all, Skipper belongs to Emma, and Emma belongs to Skipper. So you get to think about belonging, and we belong to this choir over here, so you can sit and listen before you go to your class, okay? And now the children and teachers can go to their classes.
Many thanks to our cherub and choristers choirs. Our first reading comes from the Reverend Victoria Safford, who writes, "Imagine this. On the days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur every fall, every year, the people make their peace with anyone they have wronged or slighted or injured or in any way neglected in the past 12 months. The task is not to patch things up, smooth things over, reach a compromise, or sweep mistakes and uneasy memories under the rug. The task is not to feel better. The task is ownership. The goal is truth for its own redemptive sake. I did this, I said this to you, and it was wrong. I neglected this, I botched this, I betrayed you. I demeaned you whether you ever knew it or not. This is the truth in which both of us are living. I ask you to forgive me." Imagine how many deep breaths you would need to take. Imagine how many doors you'd have to knock on, how many phone calls you'd have to make, how many letters, how many lunches and coffees, how many awkward moments with your children and your parents and with strangers. Awkward is irrelevant. The task is not about comfort, it is about truth, about wholeness and holiness, restoration. Imagine this. Someone has been preparing all year to speak with you, to write to you, to ask you a hard question. Perhaps in some way you have even known this and you've been preparing too. Finally, you answer the door or the phone or open the letter with shaky hands, and there it is, what you thought you'd been longing for but really have dreaded. Someone is asking for your forgiveness. The task is not about comfort, it is about truth. Awkward is irrelevant. You get to choose now. You have to choose whether and how you will participate in restoration. Abandon the pleasant piety that claims knee-jerk forgiveness as the unquestioned moral course. You get to choose which way will be right in this case, between you as persons and with all your gods. What response will make the world more whole? Imagine. Something yearns in us to come round right. Something creaky, rusty, heavy, almost calcified within us tries, in spite of us and all of our fears and self-deceptions, to turn and creak and turn again and come round a little truer. Imagine healing wholly from within. New beginnings, turnings, forgiveness, belonging. This month, as we turn our thoughts to our new theme, belonging, we also remember that for our partners here, Congregation Sharei Shemayim, it is the season of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the Jewish high holy days, known as the Days of Awe, which begin with celebrating the start of a new year on Rosh Hashanah and end this Wednesday with Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The days of awe celebrate the extraordinary human capacity to grow and to change, to transform and begin anew. The theme of Rosh Hashanah is that despite human weakness, the gates of repentance are always open. The preparation for this time includes reflection, self-examination, requires the setting aside of regular times for study. Repentance, it is believed, begins with the recognition of one's faults, failures and weaknesses, and a willingness to attempt to change and mend fractured relationships. There are many ways to do this. One is looking back at the ways we have hurt others, loved ones, strangers with harsh words, and doing that work of reconciliation. Another is looking at the ways we have hurt ourselves, sold ourselves short, given up on ourselves when we knew we could do it, and finding ways to reconcile with ourselves, forgive ourselves, release ourselves from those burdens, and let go. Now imagine this. What if our entire society were to dedicate one day a week to self-examination and communal transformation? I recently learned that this is what one of our members does every week. She was sitting here in this room early on a Sunday morning, early enough that we were still running around to make sure that candles were ready, the chalice had oil, and I realized that I had seen her here early on many Sundays. So I approached her and asked, "What brings you here early?" She said, "I'm here to think about my week, to think about what I said and what I did. How did I respond to my children, my coworkers? How did I spend my time? Whom did I love? Whom did I hurt? This is my time to think back and decide if I like the person I have become and what I can do to become the person I truly know I can be." Who have you become when you weren't looking? It is important to ask ourselves this question in the context of community. The wisdom of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is in many ways about strengthening community, providing a mechanism to keep community strong, to bring neighbors together, to call us to see our lives in relationship to the wider community of which we are a part, to remember we belong. That woman who arrives here early told me that she realized she could do this practice anywhere, in a park, in her car, alone at home, but realized that she needed to do it here with all of you. "I'm not alone in this," she said. "Reflecting on my life here in this place reminds me that my actions have an effect on the greater whole. I am part of something so much larger than myself, and I need to remember that." Reflecting on our lives in community creates wholeness, helping us to see the whole, helping us find ways to turn from isolation toward that wholeness. Our way of being together, our beautiful, lovely way of being together, teaches us the preciousness of each individual and the fact that we are woven out of one another and the world. This dual knowledge helps us to remember that our healing, our reconciliation isn't just a private matter, it's a communal one as well. This is a practice of paying attention and living with intention. It is a practice of belonging. Imagine something within you yearns to come round right, Something creaky, rusty, heavy, almost calcified within you is trying to turn and creak and turn again and come round a little truer. What can you do to make this world more whole?
As you remain seated in the spirit of those high holy days and that call to atonement, to greater unity and honesty, we will join in a Unitarian Universalist liturgy, number 1037. It is both spoken and sung, and all you need to know to participate is that first line that is printed is the line that we will invite you to sing with us again and again. May we think of this as a call to a meditative reflection on our own relationships in this holy time. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time we have struck out in anger without cause. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again. For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For the selfishness that sets us apart and alone. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again. For losing sight of our unity. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. Finally, for those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of our separateness. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. In this holy season and in every season, may such a spirit guide us forward. A reading from Margaret Wolf, In Sweet Company. We sit together, and I tell you things, silent, unborn, naked things that only my God has heard me say. You do not cluck your tongue at me, or roll your eyes, or split my heart into 1,000 pieces with words that have little to do with me. You do not turn away because you cannot bear to see your own unclaimed light shining in my eyes. You stay with me in the dark. You urge me into being. You make room in your heart for my voice. You rejoice in my joy. And through it all, you stand unbound by everything but the still small voice within you. I see my future self in you, just enough to risk moving beyond the familiar, just enough to leave the familiar in the past where it belongs. I breathe you in and I breathe you out in one luxurious and contented sigh. In sweet company, I am home at last. This month, as we explore belonging, I find this theme so interesting because I believe that belonging touches on components that are the best and the most challenging of what it means to be a real community. Having served a range of Unitarian Universalist congregations and non-UU congregations in the 30 years that I have been a minister, I have had so many people confess to me that they carry with them, sometimes the first time, sometimes every time that they walk into the congregation, a guarded fantasy of finding here something that is very akin to the wonderful, wise words of Starhawk. She writes, "Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere a circle of hands will open to receive us, eyes will light up as we enter, voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power." And I realize that just as often as they're telling me this secret confession that they have fantasized about this, many times I am delighted that they have found that sort of encouraging presence that Wolf writes about so beautifully, or that Starhawk describes so meaningfully, and are deeply grateful. But a good portion of the time they tell me, because they have been coming for years, and they say, "I have never felt like I belonged here." And I realize how hard this work is. That we don't naturally create a space where people can really belong, at least not for a permanent state. It takes work, it takes spiritual practice, and we do many things that help us practice both belonging and creating space to belong. Throughout the time of the interim transition exploration, we invite you to be in conversation with each other. And this month is another example of that. And the original idea actually came from a group of congregants when the transition team went out to talk with them about the transition time, and they gave the suggestion, and it is a good one. They suggested that we begin this year by inviting every group in the congregation, the board, the staff, our children, adult, youth, our religious education, every committee, every ministry team, every chalice circle, our social justice work. Ask those people to come together and speak to each other openly and honestly in an answer to two questions. The first question is for you: what is at the heart of FUS? And the second one is, and what does it look like when the congregation is living from that place, acting from it, embodying it? That practice of being in conversation and speaking your truth, and just as importantly, creating the space within you and around you to really hear the truth of others. That practice is one of the most essential in creating spaces of belonging. And so this month, if your group or groups that you are a part of have not talked about taking even 15 minutes to have this mutual conversation, I urge you to ask them to do so. You'll see more information in the newsletter and also in the red floors about how to access those questions and record them so that we can hear what you share with each other. But there is so much more that is necessary for us to create and sustain a place where people can feel they belong. Because it asks a very intense set of work and openness from each and every one of us. In the book Centering, which is available in our bookstore here, it is subtitled Navigating Race, Authenticity, and Power in Ministry. A large group of our religious professionals of color have written about their experience in our congregation. And it is not only the people who have contributed to this book, but an overwhelming majority of people of color in our congregations have said that they have had one consistent experience from us. That while the invitation was to bring their full self into this place and to work with the congregation as a highly trained religious professional, what they actually experienced is, what we really want you to do is to worship like us, to sing like us, to believe exactly like us, and to fit in so that we are comfortable with you. And if you have to leave big parts of yourself behind to do it, so be it. Can you imagine what happens when people are asked to do that by our actions, both explicit and implicit? And the thing is, we ask each other, we demand that of each other over and over again. In these conversations, what our religious professionals have said is something like this. And this was written by Manish Mishra Marzetti, who actually became the new senior minister in Ann Arbor at the end of my interim there. And as preparation for calling a minister of color, they explored this book and learned a little bit about how to stay at the table in difficult conversations and to be guided by greater truth and love. He writes that he has explored over and over again what path will really let him be his true self. And he writes, the path that I'm on is the path that makes sense to me. I realize that Unitarian Universalism will never in my lifetime be what I would like it to be, and maybe even in my bones need it to be. And yet, this is the context in which I can be most free to be who I am. So both of these things are true at the same time, and that is really hard. Obviously, if you're a minister, then you are idealistic. And if you are idealistic, you want things to line up in the ways that make sense, that are logical and in perfect congruence. That doesn't exist for me. It doesn't exist for many of us. So to really practice what it means to belong, we have to be able to have those difficult but loving in the deeper sense conversations. To not ask each other to check our most essential life components at the door to fit in here. And that is much harder work than it sounds. There are so many ways that we are invited to do that meaningful and powerful work. And Jan Richardson does such a good job in a brief poem of describing that spiritual practice that we are called to take on again and again in pursuit of true belonging. She writes, "You hardly knew how hungry you were to be gathered in, to receive the welcome that invited you to enter entirely. Tentative steps became settling in. You began to breathe again. You learned to sing. But the deal with this blessing is that it will not leave you alone. It will not let you linger, this blessing. It will ask you to leave, not because it is tired of you, but because it desires you to become the sanctuary that you have found. Again and again, we are tempted to remain in the familiar and the comfortable. And eventually that becomes a cage and a prison that stops not only our growth, but our ability to really create that space that has been so life-giving to us for others. Over and over again, belonging invites us to both practice the warm and inclusive place building that seeks to let us be known and feel cared for. And it challenges us always to grow together. It asks us to reflect honestly on what new ideas, what new people, what new thoughts will really bring us to a greater sense of truth. How is it that we allow some people to not be at the table when they could so benefit from the nourishment that we offer? How can we build a fuller community? How can we be that one who is able to sit with another and let their full selves be at home? That is the work not only of this month, but ultimately of this congregation years into decades. May we learn more about what it means to do that important practice this month. And then throughout this year and beyond, to let that practice give us life. What does it mean to be a people of belonging? May we explore it and live it together. Amen, and blessed be.
The offering is our weekly opportunity to practice generosity and abundance in the sharing of our gifts with others. I invite you now into that spirit of generosity as our offering is taken. This week's outreach recipient is the Literacy Network's Citizenship Program, and you can find out more about their good work in your red floors, and we thank you for your gifts.
So the offering is one way of belonging, and another way is to volunteer to help these services run smoothly. So I'd like to recognize those who helped with this morning's service, and you get a chance to join them by volunteering as well someday. Judy Troya has been serving as our lay minister. Thank you, Judy. Our ushers are Diana Rodham, Michael Hoon, and Mark Hill. Thanks to the three of you. Special thanks to Jean Hills and Trudy Carlson for handling the coffee today, and to Karen Rose Gredler for staffing the information table. And by the way, Karen Rose has something for you. If you decide to dine today at Panera on University Avenue, just around the corner, Karen has something that you can use to make sure that a portion of the proceeds from your Panera transaction between 4 and 6 p.m. today go to support Moses Wisdom of Madison, which is an organization that addresses issues relating to criminal justice. So again, between 4 and 6 p.m. today, using this form, your transaction at Panera on University Avenue will help support Moses. Two other announcements. Also today at 1 o'clock in the Courtyard B and C rooms, you can enjoy a short film called Wild Utah and a presentation on protecting America's Red Rock Wilderness. Again, 1 o'clock this afternoon in the Courtyard B and C rooms, a short film on the topic of Wild Utah, protecting our Red Rock Wilderness. And the third announcement, in case any of you was wondering, that bright object in the sky is the sun.
As we move into our cares of the congregation, every week we gather as a community and we bring all that we are to this place. And in this space where we are loved and we give love in return, we come together to find strength and common purpose. And so we, in a variety of ways, share with each other so that we might be a circle of concern for love and support. Among other needs and experiences, joys and sorrows this week, we honor the 24 or so folks who were part of the opening weekend retreat of Beloved Conversations with James Reeb and with First Unitarian Society. Beloved Conversations invites people to practice staying at the table and having complicated, difficult, and loving conversations around race. And so we hope to offer those conversations many times over the coming months. We honor that Eva Wright and Bob Uzecki this week celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary. Blessings to them. And from Lloyd Lewis Egan, my mother, Phoebe Reese Lewis, is in the hospital in Milwaukee. She is 90 years old and has been really healthy. And now she is recovering from kidney failure and is being treated for stage 4 multiple myeloma. We are hoping that she is pain-free. And so our thoughts go out to all that and more, as well as the joys and sorrows that are too tender, that live in the fullness of this community and its heart. May we be grateful for the miracle of life that we share and the hope that gives us the power to care, to remember, most of all to love. May this practice bring us more and more into that place. Amen and blessed be. I invite us now to rise in all the ways that we do and join our voices in our closing hymn. Number 354, We Laugh, We Cry. I invite you to sing the first and the fourth verse with us now. But most of all, we need close friends we can call our very own. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found a need to be together. We have our hearts to give. We have our thoughts to receive. And we believe that sharing is an answer. We seek elusive answers to the questions of this life. We seek to put an end to all the waste of human strife. We search for truth, equality, and blessed peace of mind. And then we come together here to make sense of what we find. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found our joy being together. And in our search for peace, maybe we'll finally see, even to question truly is an answer. And now, as we prepare to leave this place, may that deeper sense of love lead us forward as we experience and create spaces of belonging. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of that ancient wisdom that shows us how, not our fire of commitment to those things that matter most in life, or the warmth of human love and compassion. Those remain in your life until you gather in this place again. I invite you to take your seat one more time and to receive another gift of music before we leave the service this morning.